My husband, Kolya, and I did not have a happy marriage. We had something better. We had a marriage that worked. And I know that sounds strange to people today, because they think happiness is the point. They think love is a feeling that is supposed to carry you through 40, 50, 60 years like a warm wind at your back. But I will tell you what love actually is. Love is the decision to stay when everything in you wants to leave. Love is carrying water together when neither of you has the strength to carry it alone. Love is two people who are tired and cold and angry at the world and who choose every single day to be tired and cold and angry together rather than apart. That is what we had, and it lasted 51 years until the day Kolya died with his hand in mine and the stove still burning in the corner. But when I look at marriages today, I see something different. I see two people who love each other on Monday and are strangers by Friday. I see weddings that cost more than my house and marriages that last shorter than a Siberian summer. I see people who say, I deserve to be happy, as if happiness is something another person owes you, like a debt they must pay with their entire life. And I think to myself, when did this happen? When did marriage stop being a partnership and become a transaction? And the answer, the honest answer that nobody wants to hear, is that it happened when life got comfortable. I am Valentina, 82 years old. I have buried a husband, raised 3 children who survived, and watched more marriages fall apart in the last 20 years than I saw in my first 60. And I have thought about this a great deal, because marriage is not a small thing to me. It is the foundation. It is the thing that holds everything else together. When the marriage is strong, the family is strong. When the marriage breaks, everything built on top of it comes crashing down. I have seen it happen so many times that I can almost predict it now. I can look at a young couple and tell you within 5 minutes whether they will last. Not because I am wise, because the signs are always the same. Kolya and I were married in 1962. I was 19, he was 23. We did not marry for love. I know that shocks people, but it was common then. We married because it made sense. His family had land, my family had skills. He needed a wife who could work, I needed a husband who was not a drunk. That was the negotiation. It was practical, it was clear. Nobody pretended it was a fairy tale. And because of that, because we started with our eyes open instead of our hearts full of dreams, we were never disappointed. You cannot be disappointed by something you never expected. Does that mean there was no love? No, there was love, but it came later. It grew the way a tree grows, slowly and from the roots. Not from the top down, the way people try to build it now, starting with passion and hoping the roots will follow. Our love grew from shared work, from surviving together, from the thousands of small moments where one of us could have walked away and chose not to. I remember the first time I realized I loved Kolya. It was not a romantic moment. It was a Tuesday in February. He had been out in the cold for 9 hours, repairing the fence around the animal pen, because wolves had been coming closer that winter. He came inside, and his hands were so frozen he could not unbuckle his own boots. I knelt down and took them off for him, and rubbed his feet until the color came back. And he looked at me and said nothing. but in that nothing was everything. That was love. Not words, not flowers, not a ring. Just two people taking care of each other when the world was trying to freeze them to death. Marriage in my time was not about feelings. It was about function. And I know that sounds cold, but listen to me. When two people are joined by function, by shared purpose, by the daily work of keeping a family alive, they develop a bond that feelings alone can never create. Feelings change. They rise and fall like the temperature. One day you are burning with love for this person, and the next day they chew their food too loudly and you want to throw the pot at their head. That is normal. That is what living with another human being is actually like. But if your marriage is built only on feelings, then when the feelings dip, the marriage dips. And eventually it dips so low that someone walks out. Our marriage was built on necessity. We needed each other, not in the romantic way people mean when they say that today. We needed each other the way a wall needs a roof. Without him, I could not manage the land and the animals and the children alone. Without me, he could not eat or keep the house or raise the children properly. We were two halves of a functioning whole, and because we needed each other, we learned to tolerate each other, and because we tolerated each other, we learned to respect each other, and because we respected each other, we learned to love each other. That was the order: need, tolerance, respect, love. Today people start at love and skip everything else, and then they are surprised when the whole thing collapses. I want to tell you what happened when comfort arrived, because it did not arrive all at once. It came slowly like spring. First it was running water, then it was electricity, then it was a road that connected us to the town, then it was a store where you could buy bread instead of making it, then it was a machine that washed your clothes. Each of these things was a gift. I am not ungrateful, but each of these things also remove the reason to need each other. When the water comes from a pipe, you do not need someone to carry it from the well. When the bread comes from a store, you do not need someone to knead the dough at 4 in the morning. When the machine washes the clothes, you do not need someone to scrub them by the river. And slowly, one convenience at a time, the threads that held the marriage together were cut. Not by cruelty, not by betrayal, by progress. I watched it happen in my own village. The couples who got comfortable first were the couples who started fighting first. Not about important things, about nothing, about who left the door open, about who said the wrong thing to the neighbor, about tiny, meaningless irritations that became enormous because there was nothing real to struggle against anymore. When you are fighting to survive together, you do not have time to fight about who forgot to close the door. Survival gives a marriage focus. It gives it direction. Take away the survival, and what is left? Two people in a warm room with nothing to do but look at each other and find flaws. Kolya and I fought. Of course we fought. He was stubborn like a frozen river, and I had a temper that could melt snow. We argued about the children, about money, about his drinking, about my mother who lived with us for 11 years, and who he said talked more than all the birds in Siberia combined. Some of those fights were bad. There were nights I slept facing the wall and wishing I had married the Volkov boy from the next village, who had kind eyes and a softer voice. But I stayed, not because I was trapped, not because I had no choice. I stayed because leaving would have been the destruction of everything we had built. The house, the garden, the animals, the children, the life. Walking away from Kolya would have meant walking away from all of it. And I was not willing to do that. Not over anger, not over frustration, not over the feeling that I deserved something better. That phrase, I deserve better, I hear it everywhere now. It is the death sentence of modern marriage, because it assumes that better exists somewhere else, that there is a person out there who will never bore you, never frustrate you, never disappoint you, never make you want to scream into a pillow at 2 in the morning. That person does not exist. I promise you, I have lived 82 years and I have never met a single human being who was not difficult to live with in some way. The question is not whether your partner is difficult. The question is whether the difficulty is worth the life you are building together. And for most people it is. They just cannot see it because the discomfort is right in front of their face, and the life they are building is too big to see up close. I remember a couple in the town near our village, Sergei and Natasha. They were married in the 70s. Good people, hard workers. They had 3 children and a house that Sergei built with his own hands. But in the 90s, when things changed and money started coming in and life got easier, something shifted between them. Natasha started watching television, programs about people in Moscow living glamorous lives. She saw women with painted nails and clean apartments and husbands who brought flowers for no reason. And she looked at Sergei with his cracked hands and his muddy boots and his habit of falling asleep at the table after dinner, and she thought, this is not enough. She left him, took the youngest child and went to her sister in Novosibirsk. 3 years later she came back, not because Novosibirsk was bad, because she discovered something that no television program had shown her. She discovered that the glamorous life is lonely, that tainted nails do not keep you warm at night, that a man who brings flowers once a week is often the same man who forgets your name when something better walks by. She came back and Sergei took her back because he was Sergei, and that is what he did. He did not make her apologize. He did not punish her. He just moved her things back into the bedroom and went outside to chop wood. They stayed together until he died in 2012, and at his funeral she cried harder than anyone I have ever seen cry in my life. Not because she had lost a great romance, because she had lost a great partner, and she knew, finally, what that was worth. That story is the story of modern marriage in miniature. People leave because they think something better is waiting, and sometimes something better is waiting. I will not lie about that. Some marriages should end. I have seen women married to men who hurt them, men who drank everything the family had, men who treated their wives like servants instead of partners. Those marriages should end. Nobody should stay in a marriage that is destroying them. But that is not what I see happening most of the time. What I see most of the time is people leaving marriages that are merely uncomfortable, marriages that are boring, marriages that have lost their spark. And they call it courage, but it is not courage. It is impatience. It is the belief that life owes you constant excitement, and if your marriage cannot provide it, then the marriage is broken. Marriage is not excitement. Marriage is Monday morning. Marriage is who makes the tea and who brings in the wood, and who sits with the sick child at 3 in the morning when you both have to work the next day. Marriage is the accumulation of 10,000 ordinary moments that nobody else will ever see. And if you are waiting for those moments to feel exciting, you will wait forever. And you will leave, and you will find someone new. And after 2 years, the new person will also become ordinary, because that is what happens when you live with someone. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. That is not a failure of the relationship. That is the nature of life. In my village there was an old couple, Fyodor and Zina. They had been married since before the war. By the time I knew them, they barely spoke to each other. They moved around their small house like two planets in a fixed orbit, each knowing exactly where the other would be at every moment of the day, without needing to ask. People from the outside might have looked at them and said, "That is a dead marriage. There is no passion, there is no conversation." But I watched them closely, the way children watch old people when they are trying to understand the word. And what I saw was not deadness. It was something that had gone so deep, it no longer needed the surface. When Fyodor coughed in the night, Zina's hand would reach for him before she was even awake. When Zina struggled to lift the heavy pot from the stove, Fyodor was beside her without being called. They had passed through all the stages, the need, the tolerance, the respect, the love, and come out the other side into something I do not even have a word for, a kind of merging. Two people who had been together so long, they had become one thing, not in a romantic way, in a practical, physical, daily way. Like two trees that grew too close together and now share the same roots. Fyodor died first, and Zina, who had not spoken more than 20 words a day for the last decade of their marriage, sat in her kitchen and talked to his empty chair for 3 months straight. She told him everything she had never said. She told him she was angry that he left first. She told him the house was too quiet. She told him she did not know how to sleep without the sound of his breathing. The woman who had seemed so silent, so contained, so beyond the need for words. She had a lifetime of love stored inside her that only came out when it had nowhere left to go. That is what a long marriage holds. Things you do not even know are there until they are gone. I also want to say something about what comfort does to the small rituals of marriage, the things that seem meaningless but are actually the glue. In my time, every evening had a rhythm. Kolya would come in from outside. I would have the stove going and something cooking. He would wash his hands in the basin while I set the table. We would eat. He would tell me about the animals or the weather or what he had seen in the forest. I would tell him about the children or what needed fixing or what I had heard from the neighbor who walked past. Then he would smoke his pipe and I would mend clothes and eventually we would go to bed. It was the same every night, every single night for decades. And it was in that sameness that we found each other, not in the exceptional moments, in the ordinary ones. Comfort destroyed those rituals. When food comes ready-made, there is no cooking together. When clothes are cheap, there is no mending. When entertainment comes from a screen, there is no evening conversation. When heat comes from a button, there is no fire to tend together. Every convenience removed a ritual, and every ritual that disappeared took with it a moment of connection that the couple did not even realize they were losing. Until one day they sit in a warm house with nothing to do and nothing to say, and they look at each other and think, "Who are you? I do not know you anymore." But the truth is, they never stopped knowing each other. They just stopped doing things together. And doing things together is how you stay married. I think comfort ruined marriage because comfort gave people options, and options are the enemy of commitment. When you have no options, you commit fully. You invest everything. You make it work because making it work is the only path available. But when you have options, when living is easy, when you can survive alone, when there are 1,000 other people available at the touch of a screen, then commitment becomes a choice you have to make every day instead of a reality you live inside. And making that choice every day is exhausting, especially when the person beside you is snoring. I am not saying people should be trapped. I am not saying women should stay with bad men, because that is what the old ways demand. I fought too hard in my own life to say something that foolish. What I am saying is that we have swung too far in the other direction. We have made living so easy and so celebrated that staying has become suspicious. People look at a couple who have been married for 40 years and they do not think how beautiful. They think, I wonder which one of them is unhappy, as if long marriage is a prison sentence rather than an achievement. Kolya was not a perfect man. He drank too much in winter. He could go days without speaking when something troubled him, and no amount of asking would open his mouth. He was rough with the children sometimes, not violent, but loud in a way that frightened them. He never once told me I was beautiful, not in 51 years. There were moments I hated him so completely that the hatred felt like heat in my chest. But he was steady. He was there. Every morning for 51 years he was there. When Misha had pneumonia and we thought we would lose him, Kolya sat by the bed for 3 days without sleeping. When the roof collapsed under snow in the winter of 78, he rebuilt it in 4 days with frostbite on both hands. When my mother died and I could not get out of bed for a week, he fed the children and milked the goats and never said a word about it. That is not romance. That is something deeper than romance. That is the kind of love that does not need to announce itself because it is too busy keeping everyone alive. I miss him. I miss him in ways I did not expect. I do not miss the arguments or the silence or the smell of vodka on his breath in January. I miss the sound of his boots on the floor in the morning. I miss knowing that someone was on the other side of the wall. I miss the weight of another person in the bed, the way the mattress would shift when he turned over. I miss being part of a pair. That is what marriage gives you that nothing else can. The feeling of being part of something that is bigger than yourself. And when it ends, when you are alone in the house with the stove and the walls and the silence, you realize that all those irritations, all those fights, all those moments when you wanted to leave, they were nothing. They were dust. The thing that mattered was the partnership. The thing that mattered was having someone to carry the water with. Young people ask me for advice about marriage, and I never know what to say, because my advice sounds like cruelty to their ears. I want to tell them, stop looking for happiness. Start looking for someone who will stay. Someone who is useful. Someone who does not run when things get hard. Someone whose hands know how to work. Marry the person you can build something with, not the person who makes your heart beat faster, because hearts slow down. They always slow down. But a house you build together, a life you constructed side by side, that remains. That is what you will have when the feelings fade and the excitement dies, and you are two old people sitting at a table with nothing to say and everything already said. You will have the life, and that life, if you built it well, will be enough. Comfort did not kill marriage by itself. Comfort killed the need, and without need, people had to find another reason to stay, and most of them could not find one. Because the other reason, the real reason, the reason that is deeper than need and stronger than love, is choice. The stubborn, unglamorous, unromantic choice to stay with this person, not because you have to, not because you feel like it, but because you decided to. And you honor that decision the way you honor the land, by showing up every day and doing the work, whether you feel like it or not. That is what marriage is. It is showing up every day in the cold, in the heat, in the boredom and the anger and the silence and the years that blur together until you cannot remember which winter was which. You show up. And if both of you show up, then you have something. Something that no amount of comfort can replace and no amount of discomfort can destroy. You have a marriage, a real one. The kind that lasts until one of you is gone and the other is left sitting by the stove, remembering the sound of boots on the floor.